Hey, it's Jordan with Status Coup. Breaking news on day 46 of the UAW's strike against General Motors, Ford, and Stellantis. There is now a tentative agreement between UAW and General Motors, which marks the third of the big three that UAW has reached a tentative agreement with. This agreement will then go to the basically kind of a small council on the UAW, the GM council, and then if they approve it, it will go for a vote among members. That is how all of these agreements are working. They're going to a small council of UAW leaders for each company, and then if it passes, it'll go to the members. This agreement seems similar, almost identical to the agreements with Ford and Stellantis. One part I find confusing, so we'll have to wait to hear from Sean Fain and the UAW on it. But let me just read about the deal. This is from the Detroit Free Press. As of this recording, UAW hasn't announced it. So I'm going off Detroit Free Press and two other people I spoke with. But I trust that they have the facts right. They're usually pretty decent when it comes to details of these agreements. General Motors and UAW have reached a tentative agreement less than 48 hours after the union struck the automaker's Spring Hill assembly plant in Tennessee. A person familiar with the agreement said the parties reached the deal in the early morning hours today, Monday. Despite marathon bargaining sessions with GM that ran into the early morning hours over the past few days, the two sides had been at a standstill, prompting the union to order the walkout at Spring Hill late Saturday. Spring Hill has about 4,000 workers in Tennessee, and ratcheting up the pressure on GM. A spokesperson declined to speak from GM. GM has been saying it's been losing about $200 million a week. Crimea River. Person familiar with the agreement said the main issue that was holding up a deal centered on how to include Ultium Cells LLC battery plants in a master labor contract between the UAW and GM. Ultium Cells is a joint venture between GM and LG Energy Solution, so the legal language to allow for a master contract was complicated. Ultimately, the agreement with GM is a breakthrough because it will allow for the joint venture workforce to vote on unionizing future plants and then decide if they want their own contract or to be part of the master contract. GM already is operating an Ultium Cells plant in Northeast Ohio, and it is building two more Ultium Cell plants, one in Spring Hill, Tennessee, and the other in Lansing, both expected to start operations within the next 2 years. GM will start building a fourth battery plant in northern Indiana and South Korean-based Samsung SDI next year, and it will open in 2026. This is the part that I and a GM worker I just spoke with find a little confusing, so we'll have to wait to hear directly from the UAW. If you recall, about 2 weeks ago, the UAW announced that they were not going to go on strike against more plants at GM that day because they had reached an agreement with GM to make future battery plants part of the master union agreement. So at least my understanding was that was already settled, and future battery plants, electric plants, which obviously are a big part of these negotiations because these car companies don't want them to be union, that was going to be part of the master union agreement. Based on, this reading, that's not as clear to me. So I'm not saying it's not the case. It's just a little confusing. So I'll just have to wait to hear from the UAW on that before I, tell you what I think. Then let's get to the meat of other parts of the deal. You have the 25% wage increase across the life of the 4.5-year contract, a reinstatement of the 2009 cost of living adjustment formula, the same profit sharing reached with Ford, a 3-year progression to the top wage, and an end of the tier wage scales by the end of the contract. Like GM, other facilities, those employed at the Ultium Cells plant in Warren, Ohio, near GM's former Lordstown assembly plant, will automatically get an 11% increase in the first year of the contract, putting their pay at $35 an hour. By the end of the contract, GM workers will be close to $42 an hour. The agreement also allowed GM employees at engine plants a chance to transfer to either the battery plants or electric vehicle plants when there is an opening to secure jobs as GM transitions to an all-electric future. UAW National GM Councils voted, expected later this week, to vote on this, and if it approves the agreement, it will then go to local leaders. All right. So a couple things. And this really goes for all of them. Ford, Stellantis, GM. I haven't really been able to react to any of these. For those of you OG Status Couers or new viewers, I am thankfully found a book publisher for my book on the Flint water cover-up and have a deadline of November 1st. So I've been up since 2 a.m. every day for the last week, pretty much running on coffee to finish this book because I have to get the book to the publisher by November 1st. I digress. I think we need to actually accurately say, because I don't know if the reporting has been completely accurate, it's not really a 25% wage increase. It's actually more than that. When you factor in the cost of living adjustment being reinstated, which counteracts a lot of the inflation, you're talking about over 30% wage increases over the life of this agreement. So over 4.5 years, workers at Ford, Stellantis, and GM will see a 30% increase in their wages when you factor in the cost of living adjustment. Obviously, that is not the 40% that was originally asked for and demanded by the UAW, but it's also a hell of a lot more than what was originally offered, which was 9%, I believe, from GM and Stellantis and 10% from Ford. So that's about a 20% victory over the crap that was initially offered. And for you UAW members watching, if this was about 5 to 10 years ago, your previous UAW executives might have taken the former offer and just said, live to fight another day. So to me, I'm not an auto worker, and I think these workers deserve 40 to 50% more of wages. But I'm not going to poo-poo a 30% wage increase over 4.5 years, immediately getting that 11% bump. I don't think we should poo-poo that. It is definitely a major victory. It's more than they have gotten over the last 2 decades. Let me be clear. A 30% wage increase when you're factoring in flat wage increase that is being offered, plus cost of living reinstatement, that is a major victory and is more than they've gotten in 20 years. Also, cost of living being reinstated is major because that sets a precedent. It should have never been taken away in the first place. Now that's off the table for the next negotiation. You have your cost of living adjustment, and if they try to take it away, the UAW basically riots in terms of strikes. Okay, so that's number one. Number two, I do think if you're looking at the wage getting to top pay, listen, I'm a big fan of Sean Wayne. I'm a big fan of Sean Fain and the UAW, but I also have my own mind. I still think 3 years is too long. I'm just going to keep it real. It's significant improvement over 8 years. Let's be clear on that. But 3 years is significantly too long, in my opinion, to have to, work to reach top pay when you're doing the same exact job. Also, a lot of these, companies, obviously there's layoffs, and they do, as we learned on the ground, they do a lot of creative things to screw workers, lay them off, transfer them, and then they lose time on the clock, et cetera, et cetera. So there's always the risk of those workers before they reach top pay, not having the strongest job security. With that said, a 5-year victory, we're talking moving from 8 years to top pay to 3 years, is a victory. So two things can be true at the same time. I think 3 years is too long to reach top pay. It's significantly better over 8 years. And I would think, based on most workers I spoke with, we were on the ground there for 25 days, the first 25 days of the strike. A lot of the workers I spoke with said to them 2 to 3 years would be reasonable. Obviously, they would prefer it, that it happens right away. But, 2 to 3 years to get to that top pay would be more reasonable than 8. So I think reaching top pay in 3 years, although I would have preferred the UAW to hold out for 2 years, it still is a victory. I will have to hear more from Sean Fain on the tiers in this deal when the Free Press reports that the tiers will end at the end of this contract. I need to see, and I think workers want to see what does that exactly mean because, they could say whatever they want now, that the tiers will end in 4.5 years, but I need to see it in writing and specifics. I also think when you're talking about the battery plants, that is a major deal if they are getting a union vote, if they are going to very likely get it part of the master agreement. I think that is a major deal because, I mean, the federal government is pushing these companies to move all electric, and these companies have invested a lot in electric. And before these agreements, you basically had these companies trying to do a bait and switch where they're just going to cut off, 30 to 40% of the union workforce and do more with less at these battery plants. So this is a major deal in terms of protections. We will have to see. I didn't see it in the Detroit Free Press story. I believe that this GM agreement also will come with the right to strike over plant closures. That came with Ford and Stellantis as well. That is a major deal that the UAW has never had the right to strike over plant closures. And we'll have to see the rest. Things that I feel are a deficiency in this GM deal and the other deals. As far as I could tell, again, I will be happy to be wrong if Sean Fain explains otherwise. I do not think retirees got a lot in these deals. Current workers did not get their pensions back. I will just read to you what one worker told me because I asked this worker what they thought. I feel we need medical for retirees, and that is something we're not getting in any of these contracts, nor has anyone's seniority been fixed. Even John Deere workers got their pensions back. I'm not 100% sold on this. Canada got pensions for the big three. I do believe that is going to be a source of contention for not just GM workers, but Ford and Stellantis workers. That doesn't mean that the agreement won't be voted on, that they won't approve it, because obviously you're not going to get every single thing you want in the strike. That's why there's a negotiation. They definitely did very well on wages, reinstating cost of livings, dramatically lowering the time it takes to reach top pay, increased pay for temporary workers, converting temporary workers to full-time in a much shorter time period. But retirees, I do not think got, the best out of any of these deals. And, that remains to be seen. We'll have to, the members, a lot of them have said, I'm reserving judgment until I have the deal in front of me and I could read it. But, if GM, Ford, and Stellantis, if they had the money to give Canadian workers pensions, why aren't American workers getting pensions? I think we know the answer. There's a hell of a lot more workers in America than Canada with these big three companies, and GM, Ford, and Stellantis do not want to open that Pandora's box because they are greedy companies. So overall, to me, I think another major thing here, and obviously workers who desperately need help now might not really be looking down the line. A pretty significant thing here is that they extended this contract to 4.5 years rather than the traditional 4 years. Let me explain why I think that's a big deal. This is a tweet thread from the UAW. The stand-up strike will go down in history as an inflection point for our union and for our movement. We went to each of the big three and proposed an expiration date of April 30th, 2028. We did that for several reasons. First, this allows us to strike on May Day or International Workers' Day. May Day was born out of the intense struggle by workers in the United States to win an 8-hour day. That's a struggle that is just as relevant today as it was in 1889. Even though May Day has its roots here in the United States, it is widely celebrated by workers all over the world. It's more than just a day of commemoration. It's a call to action. We invite unions around the country to align your contract expirations with our own so that together we begin to flex our collective muscles. If we are going to truly take on the billionaire class and rebuild the economy so that it starts to work for the benefit of the many and not the few, then it's important that we not only strike, but that we strike together. Secondly, we demanded a longer contract because one of our biggest goals coming out of this historic contract victory is to organize like we've never organized before. When we return to the bargaining table in 2028, it won't just be with the big three, but with the big five or the big six. This contract is about more than just economic gains for auto workers. It's a turning point in the class war that has been raging in this country for the past 40 years. For too long, it's been one-sided and working class people have been losing. That's why this contract is more than a contract. It's a call to action to workers everywhere to organize and to fight for a better life. So how I interpret that, I don't know about all of you, is obviously it was important to win major victories now, but they are looking at the long game here. And the long game is end of spring, early summer 2028. Let's try and line up our ducks with other industries, other companies that we all go on strike at the same time, i.e. some type of organized general strike, where we will have a lot more leverage than just the auto workers on strike. We might have workers in retail on strike, healthcare on strike, et cetera, et cetera. That's obviously, easier said than done, because there's a lot of logistics and lining up contract expirations at the same time across industries, workers, et cetera. But let me tell you, if you have, you saw the corporate media hyperventilating, wrongly, by the way, about how this was going to hurt the economy. Imagine if the auto industry was on strike at the same time as, other manufacturing, retail, healthcare, education. That is as close to a general strike as you will ever see in the United Corporations of America. And in that case, you could basically hold these companies over bloody murder with a gun to their head. YouTube, I mean figuratively, not literally, a gun to their head. So I'm not trying to say, hey, live to fight another day, because I do think the UAW won actual historic victories of this contract. I'm not minimizing it at all. But if you are able to organize and line up other industries and other workers and other sectors at the same time, boy, would that be a beautiful spring, summer 2028. Also, it's a lot easier to strike in spring and early summer than it is in the hot, at the end of summer and when it starts becoming colder in the fall, winter. So obviously, workers care about what they're going to get right now, but unions have not had a lot of long-term strategy in the last 30, 40 years. It's always been, let's live to fight another day, survival now. So I think this is a good thing that they are talking about trying to organize now. Also, we should point out, as this strike has been going on, the UAW has been getting a ton of interest from non-union workers in joining the UAW and in trying to unionize. So it's about more than just this victory. Now, to be clear, this ain't over. I haven't polled all the workers, but this is 3 companies. Maybe Ford workers vote yes. Maybe Stellantis workers vote no. Maybe GM workers vote no. I don't know. I don't know if all 3 companies' workers are going to vote yes when the deal comes to them. It remains to be seen. So we'll have to see. I've heard kind of a split from the workers I've talked to. Most of them have said, I'm waiting to see the deals. But a lot of workers I talked to were happy, but there was a but, weren't so pleased with the retiree not having pensions for current workers reinstated and retirees not getting much. So it will remain to be seen. I will follow up once UAW announces the deal and we know more provisions. But with that, at least now, all of the workers are going back to work as this agreement is sent to UAW leaders for each company to be voted on, and then eventually sent back to the workers to vote on.